What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla SPY, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down what's going on with some big news involving Israel and Iran, what's happening with the economic calendar, and more factors that are going to be affecting the market for tomorrow. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Webull link. If you deposit any amounts of money, you're guaranteed at 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 in total, and deposits $2,000 more, and you're guaranteed 40. The offer ends very soon, in just about 4 days from now. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So looking at NIO right now, we're just range bound, and the share price was attempting to rebound. As long as we hold above our 20 EMA, there could be an attempt to continue. But if we end up losing it, this could end up dipping back down to where this imbalance happens to be. So I just wanted to call out some big news that came out over the weekend and why this could actually still affect NIO and the broader markets. So the first thing I was mentioning is this news right here. Basically, what's happening is there's a lot of tensions going on between different countries in the Middle East. And just know that with that going on, the history goes back many, many, many hundreds of years, if not longer than that. And that led to a lot of tensions that arose. Iran ended up striking Israel, and Israel just announced that they struck them right back. So, not the best of news, at least for the markets in that sense. However, Israel did not necessarily strike like oil facilities and things like that. They went over like previous test building missile facilities and things like that. So that's very, very important because now, this could lead to a continuation if Iran does strike them back and forth and back and forth. But this may have an effect on crude and may have an effect on the markets. It's not as bad as how it could have been if they had striken oil facilities and different things like that. But for now, once again, this may lead to a little bit more fear in the markets. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of a dip because of this. And then we'll see if the market gets bought back up afterwards. That's why I'm going to talk about some very, very key levels. Just know that for tomorrow, it's going to be Monday, October 28th, 2024. There's not really much coming out. We do have some manufacturing numbers at 10:30 a.m., then a couple of bill auctions at 11:30 a.m., but everything else is quite minor. For earnings, it's going to start off very, very minor as well, but later on after market close tomorrow, we have Ford announcing their earnings. Then we have lots of big tech earnings from PayPal to Alphabet, followed by Microsoft, Meta, and then Amazon and others. So make sure you watch these very, very carefully. There's also news right over here about how the fear and greed index is currently at greed, is making up the majority of sentiment. We're going to be watching to see if this becomes a little bit closer to neutral to start off the week, and then we'll see if it starts to change after that or not. So watch for that very, very carefully. Right now, momentum remains quite greedy. We're starting to see the puts and call option ratios at fear because we're starting to see a lot more puts being bought. So that's a little bit of a shift in the markets. Greed is still present, but there are a little bit more put buying, positions that are continuing to open. So that's something else that's worth noting. As far as NIO goes, I didn't see any major pieces of news. NIO did participate in the 2024 NIO Cup Formula Student Electric China, or the FSEC. So very, very interesting stuff. It's very cool how NIO is trying to determine new technologies that could be used for F1 styled vehicles. And I think it's very cool for them to work on these different projects, develop new technologies, and get their hands like out there as well to gain more exposure. On top of this, there's been a lot of talk about how NIO is launching a more competitive Envo electric EV. This is going to be an electric SUV. Very, very cool stuff too. It's supposed to be priced at a pretty modest level. And with this coming out very soon, I can't wait to see what it leads to. We could be looking for it to launch as soon as Q3 of 2025, with production starting as soon as the end of Q1. So very, very cool stuff. I went over this in more detail in my earlier video, but I think that's a bullish piece of news. There's also news that came out about how, at least for NIO moving forward, there was talk about how they had a big shift in registrations. They did see a very, very strong month, at least thus far, in Norway, and we're looking at the highest level since 2017. So you guys can see that they've registered over 111 of these SUVs in October, and just goes to show that they are continuing to grow, at least in Norway. So right now, with the total registrations increasing, I think it's great to see them getting a lot more exposure and growth in Europe, and that's great to see expansion. Although Europe is not a big market for them yet, I do believe it's a growing market and it's going to continue to be bigger and bigger, and a large percentage of their sales will come from there. Now, NIO had about 66 million in volume. That's a little bit above average, not bad whatsoever. And short volume is continuing to dip just a little bit. On top of this, JP Morgan maintains a overweight rating for the company, and the price-price ratio is still kind of flat as NIO is kind of neutral right now. And besides that, in terms of seasonality, we tend to be green more often on Tuesdays and on Wednesdays. Mondays tend to be a little bit slower historically for NIO, so just keep that in mind. So what do I see for the share price for NIO? Honestly, guys, it depends on the levels we end up holding up at. We have a very, very important 20 EMA over here at this 5.21 area. I think that this is very important because with the way things are moving, I think that we are going to be watching to see if 5.21 holds or not. If we lose that, there's going to be a risk of us getting closer to about $5 flat. And if we end up holding above 5.21, we're looking for a nice little rebound. It could go either way, but I just want to say there is a risk of the market slowing down a bit. So we might see NIO kind of like pop and start dipping later on. Because of this news involving Israel, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see a small dip because of that before another attempts to rebound. So as far as NIO goes, I think we might pop a little bit upon open to about the 5.4 area, maybe a little bit below that. Then we could be dipping back down to about 5.2, maybe a little lower than that. So it might see a slight slowdown because of that news with the broader markets before we get a bounce later on again. Um, for other factors out there, I just wanted to say that right now SPY is looking like there's a bit of a rejection right over here. And we're starting to see some more things developing. I just want to say that despite that, we shouldn't necessarily worry too much. I think that SPY is on a bit of a slowdown right now. And there is a risk of slowing down a little bit more because of this Israel Iran news. We'll have to see how that affects oil. But in my opinion, if SPY manages to reclaim 579.43, we're looking for a rebound. If it does not do that, there's a risk of us coming back down towards 576, if not this 575 area. So I think that what's happening is this might actually look like a rejection here. Look for a rebound tomorrow morning to about 5.79. And if we can't hold above 5.79.5, there is risk of this maybe dipping a little bit lower, getting closer to about 5.76 or below before we see some buyers try to defend it again. So there might be a small dip coming to the markets because of the whole Israel news. Look for a little bit more downside, and we'll see if we get a bounce after that or not. For ES, it's the same thing. Essentially, we're dipping a little bit. It is possible to dip a little bit more towards the 58.30 area, if not 58, 58.20 around that zone. And we'll see if we get a bounce off that or not. But look for a little pop and drop tomorrow morning. We might see a little bit more downside before we see some buyers defend again. So just keep that in mind. As far as Nvda goes, we're also dipping a bit. We're looking to see if we could hold 140. If we hold 140, look for a rebound for 142. If 140 fails us, however, there's a risk of us coming all the way back down towards the 138. I see a risk of us hitting 140, rebounding, and continuing to fall to 138. So just be very careful and very mindful of that because of the way that things are moving. We also saw a nice little lower high being made relative to this high right here. So Bitcoin might be dipping, but 67,200 is our next support. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. For Tesla, Tesla's also pushing very, very nicely, but I just want to call out that we have some very, very tough resistance in this 270 area. So going into tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla actually it tests this 270 zone, maybe slows down a bit, retest 263 to 262 in the morning period for a small dip before we see some buyers defend it, and they could try to hold it back above 265. So look for a small dip followed by an attempt to rebound on Tesla as long as we hold above 262. If we lose 262, we could dip a little bit more, but I still think buyers will defend it, and the big move to the upside is not done for Tesla. Look for a small dip in the morning before an attempt to rebound as the most likely case. For NQ is starting to dip a little bit. We pumped very nicely to our resistance, but just know that with the whole Israel-Iran situation, we could see a little pop to about 20,500 and then dip back down to 20,300s before this attempts to rebound. For the QQQ, we pushed very, very nicely to this resistance just under 500. Now we're attempting to dip. We could be looking for 492 as our main support. We might be dipping back down towards there before we see an attempt to rebound. So look for a dip to 492 before we see some buyers defend us, and we'll see how things end up going. As far as Aapl goes, Aapl is once again making lower highs right here. If we continue to fall, we're looking for this previous resistance becoming supports around 229.5. I think the 229 to 228 area is likely coming. So look for a small dip right here before we see some buyers defend us again. So I think that there's an uptrend on Aapl, but there might be a little bit of a dip coming before we see some buyers defend. Give this the time it needs. For the IWM, we look a little bit more bearish, watching to see if 218 holds. If it holds, this will rebound back up to 220. If not, we're looking for a little bit of a dip. It does look like it might dip a little bit lower towards about 216 or so before we see some buyers defend it. So give this a little bit more time for a bit of a dip. For coin, we're dipping a little bit. I think we might be testing 199 before we see some buyers defend it again. So look for some downside on coin. Amazon looks like it's dipping too. Looking for 187 as our support. If that does not hold us, we could be dipping all the way down to the 185s before buyers defend again. So for a little bit more downside, Meta is also dipping here. Might be looking for a move to fill this gap back down to about 168, maybe a little bit below that before some buyers come back, but it is looking a little bit more bearish. Microsoft is also forming a double top here. Might retest 424, then we might see a bounce after that. And then Google, it's kind of flat right now. It might try to push for 168 and consolidate, but it looks like it's outperforming the market. With that being said, guys, as far as the market goes, we pumped very nicely for the last few days. But now with this news that's coming out, there might be a slowdown to start off the week. Just because I'm saying there's a slowdown to start off the week, it does not mean it's going to last forever, because that's going to be determined by the big tech earnings starting on Tuesday and the big data that's going to be coming out starting on Tuesday as well. Tuesday through Friday, we have big data, and then Tuesday through Thursday, we have big earnings. So that's going to be the big determiner if we get a huge bounce or not. Look for a small slowdown to start off the week, and then we'll see if we get a big bounce later on. So just keep that in mind. With that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Make sure you watch your levels on NIO very carefully. And just know that going into tomorrow, NIO might attempt to pop up in the morning towards the 5.4 area. It may slow down as the day goes on, back down towards 5.25, if not below. So keep that in mind. Look for a pop and then a drop as the day goes on NIO, especially if you end up losing 5.21. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. I'll see you guys very soon in just one day, and peace out.